Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Scott Korb. I'm the director of the Pacific University MFA in Writing program, and I am so pleased to be presenting um, this evening our winter edition of the Mapmakers Alumni Institute, which features alumni Georgina Marie Guardado. Um, I'd also like in this moment to introduce Joanne Godley, who will be convening this event for us as part of the Alumni Council at the MFA. Joanne belongs to a subcommittee known as the Pacific Basin, and I'll allow for her in just a moment to introduce their vision and their part in the Alumni Council. But before I do that, just a few words about Joanne. Joanne is born in New York City, grew up in Detroit, Michigan during the city's industrial heyday and amidst the activism of labor unions. Although she began her writing at adolescence, she followed in her father's footsteps and became a physician, specializing in gastroenterology and public health. Inspired by working and living in West Africa, Godley Joanne resumed writing poetry and prose. She writes about having joined the Black Panther Party as a teenager. She writes about being an Ivy League educated Black female physician practicing medicine in the US. She writes about having lived and worked throughout Africa. She is a poet of witness. I just want to note as well, she has a new book coming out in February 2026, How the Black Panthers Fell from the Sky, winner of the Naomi Long Madgett 2025 Poetry Award. Very pleased and proud to be noting that. And I also will say that I'm about to put into the chat our program for tonight. And that program you'll see contains information about this programming and links to all of our guests, but also contains every other Mapmakers Alumni Institute that we've ever hosted here, a video for that. So please look out for that. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this session over to my friend Joanne to lead us into this session. So wonderful. And thank you, Prageeta, for being here with us, and Georgina, of course, for organizing this. Okay, enjoy.
Thank you, Scott, for that illustrious introduction. Welcome, everyone. The Mapmakers Alumni Institute is a hosting organization for this evening's program. Mapmakers is situated in the Pacific Alumni Council's Pacific Basin Subcommittee, of which I am a new member. The Pacific Basin speaks to the need for ongoing outreach and broad engagement across all the various sectors of our alumni community. To borrow a phrase from my fellow alum and friend, Melissa Johnson, the name Pacific Basin comes from that vast ocean territory, which touches almost all, 5 out of the 7 continents. The mission of the subcommittee is to provide a platform for craft and community by casting a broad net and including features of accessibility, diversity, and inclusion. This evening's Mapmakers Alumni Program is entitled Between Sighs on Writing Through Grief. It is the brainchild of my friend and fellow poet and alum, Georgina Marie Guardado. I'm honored to introduce her. About Georgina. She is a poet, writer, editor, and educator. She was raised and lives in Northern California. She is a poet laureate emerita of Lake County, California for 2020 to 2024, and was the first Mexican American and the youngest individual to serve in this role. She is a Poets Laureate Fellow in the Academy of American Poets and is president of the Mendocino Coast Writers Conference. She has published widely, including 2 chapbooks, and her first full-length poetry collection is forthcoming. I met Georgina in the Pacific MFA program, and we were roommates for the first 2 semesters. I can say without hesitation that Georgina is an impassioned literary activist, quietly volunteering for activities from library committees to assuming leadership roles to hold together the Writers of Color organization. As a recent Pacific MFA graduate, she was a Kwame Dawes Mapmaker Scholar. I was fortunate to both be on her thesis committee and to have been her presentation partner for the graduate presentation. Her thesis, entitled "What I Can Still Keep Alive," deals elegantly and poignantly with themes of identity, grief, trauma, and healing. She is invested in determining how all writers, and particularly those writing about such issues as grief, can practice self-care as they do the heavy emotional lifting. It gives me great pleasure to turn this program over to the very talented Georgina Marie Guardado.
Thank you so much, Joanne. That's such a lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here, especially Prageeta and to the MFA program for providing me with this opportunity. Tonight's event is about writing through grief. I'll start by sharing a few poems of my own before turning it over to Prageeta for a reading of her work, and we'll be in conversation for a bit, and then we'll close with the audience Q&A. I wanted to just preface the event as a whole by welcoming writers of all genres, all levels, and all forms of grief. So I'm going to read 3 poems of mine. Some of you may have heard these already. They were part of my thesis and my thesis presentation. I'm going to start with A Sister's Lament. I said I wouldn't trap myself in the ache of loss, in these days of immersing myself in new knowledge, in creating new shapes of language that don't allow me to forget there is magic imprinted in my knuckles, a nakedness in my palm I slip and let go of all too often. But I have to remember the motion of loss too is a nakedness, is a slipping of time, and in the bluest nude of my own falling, I have to know when to take the next breath and take a step forward in that nebulous space where one foot stands in a solid planting and one carries over the haze into the fog of living. And the ghosts of my sisters hover in the primal knowing, and how I would have killed for them if I needed to, myself even, gifting them a kidney, a sliver of my liver, the marrow of my bones, anything for them to remain in the now for their sons. And I wouldn't need to define loss in the language of my anatomy and how it feels in each moment to speak when they are not in the room, in any life. This next poem is Winter Solstice 2024. And it's interesting, I wrote this around this time last December, actually. The year has swallowed itself, taking into the body of time every rainfall that didn't come soon enough, devouring the fruits of season, the underbearing seeds which didn't quite grasp the earth for fertilization. It has taken unborn berries, lost opportunities to place palms to ground. Instead, palms were thrown to the sky, facing upward, a sign of surrendering, of wishing back loved ones who are buried in dark earth, nurturing the underground of memory. It was too soon and unexpected, fast year, decaying time, death noticed too heavily. I didn't have another chance to press my fingers with my sisters to exchange our pain for each other, a game we played with each discontentment of our earthly selves. Now she is root-bound, heaven gained. The year is Decembering away. Frost-covered country fences ache with nostalgia under setting suns. The year ticks with quiet clocks to swallow what's left, pine needles underfoot, the burning of citrus in warm homes, the great grief larger than winter. I'm going to close with a shorter poem, Clary Sage. The years have concluded that I will carry emptiness indefinitely. When heavy winds make the cemetery trees sway, I feel it. There is no worry, but consideration for what is left to grow. If I could manifest the bodies of my sisters, if I could plant gardenia and calla lilies and be assured they would feel the blooming stems, grasp the scent of floral birth, the ache of their loss would lessen. The clary sage I inhale and exhale each morning to stave off the pain of everything would not be such a necessity. I have lost women who made up parts of me, sealed in urns and caskets. They have become one with the unknown. anointed by the same seasons that stretch my grief beyond the roots of understanding. I will water it daily. Thank you. It's my honor now to introduce Prageeta Sharma. Prageeta is the author of 6 collections of poetry, most recently Onement Won and Grief Sequence. I have both of them on my desk here. I'm so excited to speak with you. She is the founder of the conference Thinking Its Presence, an interdisciplinary conference on race, creative writing, and artistic and aesthetic practices, the Henry G. Lee 37th Professor of English at Pomona College, and a recent recipient of the 2025 NEA Creative Writing Fellowship. Please welcome Prageeta Sharma.
Thank you, Georgina. That was really beautiful, and obviously just heartbreaking. Particularly, what I gather is thinking about multiple loss, and thinking just about I just had to write down grief. I think it was larger than winter. Or I might have misparaphrased, or paraphrased. But just thinking about, as we are entering into this winter time, and the space it holds of the darkness. So those were really beautiful. So I think what I'll do is I'll read 3 poems as well. And I guess I'll start with I'm referring to these questions that I have, but I wanted to start with between sighs, and just because you have directed me over there, and I haven't been over there in a while to this poem, so it's like visiting. I'm visiting it. I'll start with Grief Sequence, and this is just reading about a memorial of my first husband who passed from cancer, esophageal cancer, in 2015. And there's just a lot of social tensions, I guess, in here. Between sighs. I'm located further inside of this neural obstacle. It is mentally heavy. I organized the memorial service at which your favorite European meal coats the broad corners of the table with crusts and crumbles and rich spreads, olives and such. There are bounty loaves, beveled cheeses, steak tartare, and a filial tonality in the weeping around me. In the speeches, in the stories, so many of our friends and our colleagues also attend. Museum room alight, 100 sighs over and over again. You love it from afar, I think, all occurring within. Family of yours attended, I think with foggy distance of pain. We are a relation through marriage, and yet you are the one person of me. We possessed each other, not churched or blocked or fluffed. We were one and now not. Today, I believe somehow with you dead and me alive, that we evaded church and still received its blessings. I'm forming a mental image of numbers in the formal space of time. Sometimes you come back to me complete. Sometimes I just see a yellowish form. Do you remember our colleague who wouldn't speak to you before you died, maybe 3 months before, maybe longer? You didn't know you were sick, neither did she. She wouldn't make eye contact, just gave you sharp stares from her incline. She didn't like us then. She scurried into her universe, which was not ours. I'd wished she were an imaginary number. I wish it now, too. I want her to ignore me the way she likes to. I wish she would. I pray she will. You must have seen us from your distance when she came up to me at your memorial and apologized for treating us both so badly that these last 6 years. I was moved by it, but then I learned several months later she disparaged me in the same hour. Under what kind of heart, with what sentience? I wish I could draw you the lines of selves as they spread out in front of me in their inlets, in their narrow channels, in their division. So the apology was not genuine. I thought this treatment was over, but it wasn't. I was just spared it for a little while, The other friend sheared me from ideas of loyalty. I found this out later. You predicted it. You would have felt sad and angry for me, but you aren't here. You're where your distance lives. You would remind me not to feel sorry for myself because there really is an abundance of my dog. I'm just going to shut the door. Okay, do we hear the dog? Okay, sorry. Okay. You are where your distance lives. You would remind me not to feel sorry for myself because there really is an abundance of friends encircling me. There's no you, I say to you. There's no intercommunication. We dilate. That is us. That is us inside it. I feel you inside, but not in space. This is what's devastating. This has been the injurious landscape from which you fled, skillfully sick, what you left me with. I know it wasn't skillful at all, but I want to goad you. I know you didn't want to flee. Life meant much, much those last months. You and I inside of vital functions, some imaginary, some taken to human forms. Some were the last gasps I heard. There is a neural obstacle of one's mind to consider, and I now take my scarf off of fear and center it around the bloat of time, of whatever can bring the sequence to the basic character of itself. You might be sitting by me in your distance. I will try to feel the light or manner of this as though you had given me something to put together, a fastening coverlet before we eat or before we go to bed, or to cover your head to feed you what I bought in excess at the grocery store. This gesture of the overbalanced, the solitary in which I see things lined differently before me now, because it had been stitched from your mouth and gone. So I trudged to look beneath and found I trudge. It's trudging we do between sighs, I think. I guess I will just read, I'll read two poems and then, okay. This this poem helped me title this book, 1-1, and it's thinking about Barnett Newman, but it helped me move through grief and empower myself with poetry. And it's A and then O-N-E and then W-O-N, a 1-1. In it, I found that the political discourse would love its ethical moon, a wonderment, a one sum, bewitching affinities built upon antinomies, abstract and expression, a wool cap of ornament for the sake of weather. Anew helped, loving her helplessly anew helped, leaving it all behind helplessly helped. Building around the moribund became a kind of blessing. I left constituents around the number 1, and I won, and I felt simple and glad, and finally incandescent, and comfortably large in my honesty, a kind of hanging of the rituals, the clothes, the sense of living in them upright. I felt trouble pinging from my thumb muscles, but ignored the throb. I looked out and out into a dense and driven fog and said goodbye to its flavor, goodbye to more than 10 years of saying, will you please love me? I wanted to birth a kind of abstract expressionism of the merely objective and the racialized lover of things. One meant or ornament, or I won an ornament, or I loved an ornament, and the one-ment of myself resolved. I resolved, and thus I became into myself a one that I thought would never be allowed. I moved outside of the fog into a place that signified art. So I will just end with the only poem that I wrote after my second husband passed. My second husband passed of bile duct cancer after I was caregiving him for about 2.5 years. And I found a journal the day after he died that said last times, and he was listing the last things that we had done the last time we were in Seattle together, which is where he decided he wanted to have hospice. And I'm just quoting a line from the Vachanas, which is a Vedic scripture that actually tries to synthesize a little bit more of atheism than other scriptures. So it says that I have known is void indeed, that I haven't is void indeed. And the title of this poem is Passions of the Void. If I believed in a crafted delusion upon which my imagining conjures a will for one-ment, then I'm capable of avowing the void. What I learned from the hall of experience is that you are my vine of desire. We are entwined in your spiral-bound notebook, which I found today with a list titled Last Times. I think who disappeared, who entered the void, who carried us straight to it, and then walked into the substance of the last time, a void. If I clutch the many last times, I will stay in a bereft and isolated place. Is this also a void, or can it be a place of found meaning? The grief book says that I need to dip in and out. I am full of nothing akin to one-ment. Rather now it is a void full of suffocating ivy. Togetherness was a myth we had in earnest, which builds a tractable way into provocation, into the gray sense of independence you offered me. But now, no candles. I will switch on battery-operated ones because I will forgetfully walk away from anything lit. And yet I will speak to you brazenly and in random fits with needy associations. My chatter that can only reach the docile you in dream illusion. An ornament is how we decorate the figure whom we've lost forever. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful reading.
Thank you. Yours was too. Oh.
Thank you. So we'll move on to a conversation. I set aside 5 questions to ask you, and it was kind of difficult to narrow it down because I have so many questions for you. But the first one is about the title of this event, which you already gathered was inspired by your poem. In my 3rd semester at Pacific University's MFA program, I wrote a critical essay on writing through grief. It was called In the Name of Our Craft, and it explored self-care and writing through grief, in which I analyzed 2 authors and their latest collections. And one of them was yours, the collection Grief Sequence. And Scott put a link in the chat for anyone who hasn't read it. I definitely recommend it. So my question is, I felt that you bravely uncovered yourself for the reader to see layers of grief and perhaps find themselves there, myself included. After losing 2 sisters, it was easy for me to relate to lines in this poem like, it is mentally heavy. I organize the memorial service at which your favorite European meal coats the broad corners of the table with crusts and crumbles and rich spreads, olives, and such. Can you share how this poem came to be in the context of the full collection?
Sure. Yes. I think a couple of things were happening in putting this manuscript together and to write about this event, to think about memorializing in a way that holds, a complicated set of feelings, documents the moment as it's unfolding, to try to carry. What I did do is tried to carry the discomfort along with the recognition. I'm speaking to Dale, my first husband, in an address to the dead, but I'm also kind of chronicling the kind of gossip of our kind of our social world together, and it really helped me. It helped me document, I guess, the everyday for myself as I was in grief, which felt really important. I couldn't remember the marriage for the first 3 months. I couldn't remember anything. I felt so just traumatized over Dale's death because it was so quick from diagnosis, and I didn't understand he was dying. I didn't get it. I didn't realize that this cancer would take him so quickly, and that what he was exhibiting was dying. And so I think everything that I tried to document was a process of navigating shock and disbelief, and then speaking to him as if he were there, but recognizing he wasn't. But I guess that helps. I hope that gives you context, because I think a lot of poems function that way. But it helped me ground myself in a voice I hadn't understood.
Yeah, thank you. It does answer my question. And this poem resonated so deeply. That's why I chose the title for this event. And so I was selfishly kind of wanting to know more about how that fit. And I think the way that you explain documenting the day-to-day of grief, I think that comes through your work so clearly. And that's what makes it, in my experience, so relatable, is it is the moments between the sighs of grief that makes it able to be, internalized and digested. And it's hard to even read when you're grieving, let alone write. So it's, your work is incredible that way.
It was weird to read it again because I hadn't read it in a few years.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing it.
So I felt like I was like, oh, this is longer than I realized. I just like thought but it was interesting to go back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My next question, it's a little bit longer. I just wanted to share a little bit of backstory for our
Yeah.
attendees. I first became aware of you and your work in 2017 when I read an interview in the Creative Independent titled Prageeta Sharma on Writing Through Grief. And it resonated so deeply with me as I began to explore my own grief in writing. And I've since come back to that interview many years since then. And I remember thinking that it was so poignant and unabashed in a society where we don't always openly speak about grief. And in that interview, you stated, I've just been examining what it means to have poetry document our ideas of ourselves and how that shifts. If you don't work through documenting that moment, you may lose it. You lose something precious about a self that you understand in a moment. So I'm wondering if this still rings true for you, and have you seen different versions of yourself as you move through different iterations of grief?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to I'm grateful to my editor Josh Beckman for kind of letting me put this book together. I put this manuscript together and wrote to him about it, and we sort of worked through this. Um, and now when I look back at it after having written Onement Won and having lost two husbands and my mother, I lost my second husband and my mother the same year. And I I learned that the shock and disbelief I had in grief sequence was precious, because I just had anticipatory grief in Onement Won. Halfway through, half of that was written while I was just really kind of falling in love with a new life. Um, and then the second half is anticipatory grief, trying to document what I could, because I had the knowledge to do that, but I didn't have a sense of what to do with anticipatory grief. So I don't know if that actually was really circular, but I think what I'm grateful to is the prose poem. I learned how to write a prose poem that felt like a micro essay a little, but it got to meander, and it could go into the afterlife, and it could go into all these spaces. So I think I've learned that I have a different, I just have a different voice maybe with each book, or a different project, a different journey. I joke with my students that I used to be funny, and then moved to Montana and then wrote about race and discrimination, and then I slowly moved to death and grief. So I'm a lot of fun.
There's one of my dear friends is in the audience tonight, and we joke about that quite a bit, about like we just can't get away from writing our trauma. That's what writing's for.
Yeah.
I think there's actually a movie called I Used to Be Funny about a stand-up comedian that's like going through a traumatic event.
I
Triggered
need
for me.
to see that.
Speaking of the prose poem, this next question kind of goes into the form of some of your work. So grief sequence is filled with such intimacy and anguish and different forms of craft. And in opposition to the sort of waves grief typically arrives in. Some of your poems seem very intentionally and carefully crafted. So I'm wondering if you can speak about how you chose to shape some of the poems that are maybe non-traditional, and did they correspond to any somatic feelings that you might have been feeling as a response to grief?
Yes, I guess it's hard for me to know which ones look more crafted than the others, because sometimes you surprise yourself by thinking something's more crafted. I mean, I would say that the Glacier National Park felt more crafted and lyrical, whereas some of the death sequences felt raw to me. So I wondered really if the prose poem could hold more digression and the lyric could hold more like ephemeral feeling. But I'm not sure. I'm constantly thinking about what the lyric poem does. I'm certainly trying to do that in Onement Won. And I have some theories about the lyric form and ideas of spirituality that I'm trying to formulate. Also with kind of critiques of Hinduism. So I guess I am trying to figure out. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm just looking at it again. Like I am trying to think about what form means to me when it is non-traditional. But I also wonder where we are with received form. I mean, I'm finding I'm teaching more of it to my students because they are so comfortable with experimentation. But historically, when I was learning form, it was everywhere and it was constant that I wanted to break free of that and think about what non-traditional forms look like. So I always just feel like I'm in between ideas of prosody, but I'm not that radical. So I have no idea. I think it's really for you to decide, or the reader decides how, like, what is exploratory, what is experimental. But yes, I do have ideas about lyric poetry and prosody and race. Um, I don't know if that helped.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also I'm still reading One Meant One, and there's definitely like a tie into all three of those concepts in the book. There's more, at least in my perspective so far of what I've read, there's also more of addressing race and racial issues in this new collection. So it's thank you, Scott, for putting links in the chat, by the way, to the interview that I referenced, and I put the link to your latest book in there as well.
I mean, I guess I think that I've been working on a memoir and some of the poems address this, but I've been trying to make a distinction between the grief around spousal loss or of multiple loss or of loss, and then the grief around racial grief and why people have, give you space and they support you with spousal loss and death loss, but it's very hard for people to understand how to be compassionate around racial grief.
Yeah, I'm seeing Joanne's response to that in the her little square screen that really resonates deeply. And I'm curious, do you also feel like the two griefs intersect a lot in your life between spousal loss and race, or do you feel like they're quite separated?
They feel very separate. Um, they feel like compartmentalized
Mm,
because of the way they're given space or not given space.
yeah.
Yeah. So they, when I was experiencing a lot of discrimination and had to do some legal filing around discrimination when Dale got sick, or it was right before Dale died. And I realized that it kind of I just was able to just take out those toxic things. Like I just moved them aside when I was grieving death. And that was a relief. That
Mm,
was maybe the only way they were interconnected is I could see things clearly. So I could kind of sever the racial grief for a little while,
Mhm.
which taught me what I could do with it if I wanted to. But
Yeah,
it's impossible. It only came with the price of death.
yeah, that's really powerful. That could be a whole talk on its own too, going over racial grief. Yeah.
And that's what I'm writing about in prose to try to figure it out. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Do you have any regular self-care practices as a writer? And do you have any general advice for writers moving through grief on and off the page?
Some of it is just stuff you probably already know or experienced is, I mean, this one is more, this is like just my 2 cents. I think when we're experiencing profound loss, we lose some of those unnecessary filters. And so in some ways I wanted to experiment with being more honest and having more candor and saying what I need. And I think the best advice I got, and I'll talk about writing too, but the best advice I got, which I hold true is in my life, is that when you're in raw grief, um, keep only dear people close. And I think I just started to think about that as a value is just to surround myself with people whom I can trust and that actually care about me. And then, yeah, of course, we all have acquaintances and we have the world, the social world to deal with. Um, but I guess a practice is just trying to write.
Stay with the car.
Yeah.
So I think someone's unmuted. If you could mute yourself, that would be great.
So I think just to have a practice where I try to center what is meaningful to me again to cut out the noise, but also to do that with writing. Um, Also, I started to see briefly like a somatic therapist,
Mm.
and it's so obvious, but I've changed my life around it. And I actually haven't been seeing this therapist. I only saw them for a short period of time, but they started to ask me what was coming up in my body when I was talking about grief or I was thinking about something. And so I started to really look to that question when I was writing and to try to release some of the tension by describing it, writing through it, and kind of confronting it so it would leave my body and be on the page. Um, so that has helped really just to help my nervous system be released onto the page. I'm sure we all do this, but it was important to kind of start to actually recognize it for myself.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think with multiple losses that I've experienced, especially with my sisters, I've learned that my body feels it sometimes before my mind and emotions do. So somatic work has really helped for me, even if it's just deep breath work on a day-to-day basis. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah, it's meaningful to think about how we uh, kind of go deeper with that work, um, and however it manifests.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I have one more question and then we'll move on to an audience Q&A. So folks, please feel free to think about your questions. So my last question is, I read another quote from the Poetry Foundation where you said, I was taught to honor knowledge and books like a religion. And so for me, poetry keeps this relationship close, true, active. In this ongoing relationship, are there writers or artists that you turn to often, or maybe even when you're experiencing grief?
Oh God, I mean, I love so many poets. Oh, uh, oh, I have to, you know what? I always go blank. And then as soon as, we're on to something else, I'll start thinking about everything. But, I've been teaching this class called Other Influences, and it's on feminist avant-garde. And so I've been thinking a lot about, poets that I love. And so I've had and writers. So it's like I think about Hua Win, who's just a wonderful poet. I think about they've also uh, come visit Pomona this semester, so they're on my mind, as well as Renee Gladman and Eileen Miles, and um, but and then I think about early modernists like Laura Riding Jackson. I think about Audre Lorde has helped so much, and I want to kind of teach again the cancer journals. Um, I'm just looking at my desk of things, but I have a lot of other things that inspire me, like Sarah Med's The Feminist Killjoy Handbook, the radical potential of getting in the way. But I feel like I put my grief and my feminism and my urgency in the way. Um, but I just love so much. I think about my mentors who have passed, C.D. Wright, the late C.D. Wright, and Michael S. Harper. And I think what I'm trying to do is just kind of honor friendships and the way poets have always taught me how to live.
You said Ma Win. Is that Ma Shin Win?
Oh no, Hua Win?
Ma Win. Okay, got
Yes,
it.
yes, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And thank you for answering all these questions. Thank you.
Oh, I we could talk about multiple loss, that's a very, it's hard to explain how cumulative, the cumulativeness creates a different impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to, frame this event around grief because grief has been such a big part of my life and my writing life. But also just everyone, I feel like everyone I come in contact with is grieving in some way this year, whether it be politics or race or just the world at large. There's so much tragedy. And so I think all of this, even though we kind of talked about the loss of like sisters and spouses, I think it can be applied to so many different forms of grief. So I appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah, there's an article I'll send you that actually my therapist sent me on political grief.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah.
it's written by a, a psychiatrist, and so it's very interesting to kind of chart it that way.
Yeah, I'd love to read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to open it up to the group to do a Q&A. Oh, Roni, I already see your hand up.
Thank you, Georgina, and thank you, Prageeta, for being part of our community. So my question is, some writers I've heard say that the most has been written about love. And I'm looking at these two lines by Chris Abani in his book, Smoking the Bible. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it says, love is a figure of speech, but also a real thing, as a stone baking in the relentless sun. How would either of you characterize love, having just spoken about grief and thought about grief in such a meaningful and sometimes difficult, many times difficult way? Thank you.
I was just at a little retreat in Montana with some scholars and friends, and we were talking about how I've moved away from Hinduism, and I was trying to say that it was too structured around hierarchy for me, and also being widowed twice and feeling like the taboo of being widowed in Hinduism was just too much for me to bear. That I moved to love as my real spiritual practice. I really feel that my second husband was my real true love. And so it was like I was tested um, in losing him. I thought with grief sequence that I was challenged, but losing love I have a partner now again, and so I just believe. I guess I'm just saying I really believe in the spiritual practice of loving important person, loving my friends, loving my family. It sounds very simple, but that's what I believe.
There's a question from Joanne in the chat. Thank you for this awesome discussion. Prageeta, have you required some distance between a death and your ability to write about the individual or event?
That's a good question. Yeah, I haven't, I've been, Dale, you can see in Grief Sequence that he was a hard person to love. And I was in a lot of shock and disbelief, but I also discovered a lot of secrets. And there was so much pain after he died that I took some distance in order to process, but I also needed to process. So the poems have different um, marks of distance in them. With Mike, I think I had 2.5 years of caregiving. Um, so the anticipatory grief allowed for a kind of poem I wrote while caregiving. But the kind of pain I have in that loss, I can't I can't access it in many ways. Um,
Thank you. There's a question from Shannon. Hi, Shannon. Wonderful discussion so far. Prageeta, I would love to hear more about your thoughts on the lyric and race that you mentioned.
Yeah, I had been running a conference called Thinking Its Presence, inspired and generated from the scholar Dorothy Wong's book on Asian American poetry and subjectivity. And in it, Dorothy makes this really kind of this crucial point about um, the lyric poem and when white writers, and I apologize, I'm not trying to generalize, I'm just thinking about this theory. Um, we're often reading, say, a poem that has no trace of race in it, and it will be an extraordinary, beautiful poem about the natural world. As soon as a writer of color will write a poem about the natural world, it's marked a certain way and it's not neutral anymore. And so I was interested in that close reading of what neutrality and lyric, like what makes a good poem if it's not attached to race. So I started to think about, this is like a longer point, but I started to think about what is neutral language in the lyric and what is not neutral language. And so lots of what I do in my poems is I try to explore non-neutral positions that feel authentic to me around, uh, ideas of power, supremacy, difficulty, affect, and just I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just thinking about the function of how the lyric has historically been very neutral, and then I didn't want to participate in that neutrality. Um, Shannon, I don't know if that helps, but.
Are there other questions? I think I captured everything in the chat. Please feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, or yeah, lady.
Gina, and thank you, Prageeta, for such a beautiful topic and discussions and for your vulnerability. The Pacific community just came off a craft weekend, the Body Chronicles, and the theme was the soft animal of your body. So we were uh, the soft animal of your body, and we were discussing the role of the non-human in our lives. And as you were reading your first your first poem, your dog started barking, which I loved. And I was curious if there is a connection between the non-humans in your life, and if they have in fact helped with the process of grief, if they have inspired um, some sort of healing around that. I would just be curious about that.
Oh, my doodle, Archana, she's lovely. She came into our lives 5 years ago, and I'm grateful to her. We kind of live to get we yeah, she as soon after Mike passed, she sleeps with me in the room, and she takes good care of me, and I take good care of her. So I feel very attached to my dog. And in a weird way, when I was putting Onement Won together, I was because Barnett Newman is really influenced by Faust, Goethe's Faust, and in Faust there is a poodle that keeps appearing in the poem, and so I was like, I would allow my doodle to appear in the poem, and to think about that felt uncanny to me. Um, to I mean, even though what Faust is negotiating is not what I'm negotiating, but I was kind of interested in the just a kind of an existential or the I mean the this world is Faustian right now. So in fact, that yeah, there's I don't I'm not I really do like thinking about how the non-human um is um working with our consciousness, and I'm still figuring that out, like where I am with everything, but I'm grateful to surrender to it. Thank you.
It's a really great question. Thanks, lady. I I just want to say that dogs in particular have had a really huge impact on my grief. And I lost one of my dogs too after losing one of my sisters, and then my other dog was grieving the loss of my other dog. So it's been an incredible thing to also connect with animals over grief. I think they grieve as much as we do. So I'm glad you brought that up. Olabi and then Laura.
Yes, hello. Thank you both. Thank you, Georgina. Thank you, Prageeta, for a very thought-provoking and with lots of angles that I've never seen before or that were very meaningful. Um, you both, I think, present a grief that feels very close and immediate. Do you ever write now, or maybe write after a distance of maybe years or after a longer distance? Do you revisit your grief in poetry for losses that may be, receding further and further from the distance? Is that something that's a part of your practice?
I've been having that experience reading, between sighs. I think it's really interesting to actually have your poems teach you where you are with them, what that, it's like all this relational work that we get to do with ourselves when we've written a poem. Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about time. I'm just so grateful to be able to put something together that allows me to hold things close and put them down. Um, Georgina, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So one of my sisters passed in 2018 and the other one passed 2024. And so there's a gap between them. And when I was writing my thesis, actually, I graduated in June. I was really feeling the loss of both of them. And so it was interesting the way that it started to feel like very visceral, having lost my first sister 7 years ago and then losing this other sister. And the grief I think it kind of became enmeshed, like the two different griefs. And there were other losses in between. And so I think just in terms of like what it's been like since losing my first sister, I can have 7 years go by and I still end up writing about her and thinking about her quite a bit. So it's really interesting. And there's also been other losses that I just don't write about as much, like my father or my grandmother that passed. I think it's kind of subjective in a way, I guess, each individual loss. Yeah, that's a great question. Laura, would you like to ask yours?
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you. So I'm curious because these are intimate relationships. And I was wondering if you think about what details about the person that you want to include or leave out as kind of a form of respect or privacy when you're writing about these losses.
Yeah. I was very torn. I felt very hurt by Dale, and I needed to process whatever I needed to process. And I actually, I I didn't actually think about respect for with Dale, and I disclose a little bit more, and I have a poem called Widowing that really kind of it's about finding condoms in his bags after he's passed. Sorry to be so explicit. And they weren't for me. Um, and I had to write that out because I needed it to go somewhere. I needed it not in my, I didn't need it seared in my um, memory anymore. So I think I don't know. I don't know what privacy is sometimes. I hear you. I I guess with Mike actually was widowed, and he left me his late wife's um, diaries so that I could celebrate her. And so that's a whole other story. But I think it really you have to honor people the way they want to be honored. And if they do dishonor you, then you get to do what you need to do. Sorry to be blunt.
That's a great question. All of these have been really great questions. We have time for one more, and Carla asks a question in the chat that I thought was really interesting. She's curious if either of us have had dreams while grieving that became new poems.
Several in grief sequence came from dreams. And definitely with grief sequence, I think there are 3 poems that came from dreams, and I kept a journal only for dreams where Dale appeared, and it was very hazy. The I did want to say one last thing. The only dream I had really of Mike that was substantive was Profound, where I saw him on a computer screen and he basically said, I have a wife now and we just had a baby and we named baby Prageeta. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. And I'm not one for supernatural belief, but it was it gave me such joy that I couldn't find in any other way.
That's really moving.
Yeah, it was like we're parallel.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I tend to have animal dreams, and some poems that have come from my dreams had to do with animals that appeared in my dreams while I was grieving. And usually it tends to be snakes, which is a fear that I've developed as an adult. So I usually know that my brain's going through some kind of transformation. And so I try to document those dreams and then write from them. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, for these amazing questions. I want to thank you so much, Prageeta, for taking the time. This is really lovely, and I appreciate you so much. And Scott, thanks for letting me do this and for keeping up with the chat. And I encourage folks to save the chat. There's lots of links in there. Prageeta, do you want to share anything before we close?
Oh, I just thank you, Georgina. Thank you, Scott. But Georgina, I hope we stay in touch and we have to have dinner sometime and
Yeah.
just talk about poetry together.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thanks again.
Thanks to everyone, these wonderful questions, and this is such a vibrant community. I bet that craft weekend was just phenomenal, and I really enjoyed everybody, and it was really an honor to be here with you.
Thanks, Prageeta.
Thank you.
Scott, would you like to say anything before we close?
Only thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take good care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.